Jackal Among Snakes. Author, Nemorosus. Chapter 111, An Arid Goodbye. Argrave blinked open his eyes, staring up at the white ceiling above. He took a deep breath. His lungs felt back to working order. Finally, he started to move and found his body happy to obey. He sat up, his head clear and everything in working order. He touched his chest, putting on a pondering expression. Annalise looked at him from where she sat at a table, reading a book. "You slept well," she remarked. Argrave ran his hand over his face. "Yeah, I guess I did. I feel pretty good, actually." He turned to look at her. "Had a dream. Went to this barbecue place I always used to go to. You were there. Then it got weird." Argrave shook his head. "And you felt this was worth sharing?" Garm remarked. Argrave turned his gaze to him. He had many choice retorts in mind, but what Annalise had told him yesterday still stuck with him. He clasped his hands together and asked cheerily, "How are you doing, Garm?" Garm could not move, but Argrave veritably saw him shrink away. "I'm fine," he responded awkwardly. "That's good. Sorry we couldn't take you with last night," he apologized. "I hope you understand why, at least." "It's fine," he dismissed, closing his eyes so as not to look at Argrave. Bunch of people eating, smacking their lips, wouldn't want to be there, anyway. Even still, Argrave shook his head, then stood, setting aside the woolen blanket and grabbing his duster off a chair. "Where's?" The door opened, and Guilliman ducked through. "Speak of the devil," Argrave said, throwing his duster on quickly. "The sandstorm has cleared," Guilliman reported, and then slammed the door especially loudly. Argrave furrowed his brows. "That's good news." "No, something wrong?" "Nothing," he answered after a time. Argrave looked to Annalise, who returned his glance with an unspoken confirmation that something was indeed wrong. "Right," Argrave continued. "Well, we should find that merchant Tasha referred me to. His name was Titus, I believe." Annalise shut her book, then came to her feet. "I shall get my things together." Though Argrave didn't wish to press Guilliman as to what was bothering him, believing it might have something to do with his vampirism, Argrave found later that they did not need to ask. When they made it to the central square, Argrave noticed there was a particularly large crowd around there. His first instinct was to avoid it, but curiosity drove him to see what they were gathering around. When he grew close alongside Annalise and Guilliman, he found it easy to look over the crowd of people ahead. Chairs had been arranged in a circle around the fountain statue depicting Fellhorn. Argrave saw strange dark lumps on them but couldn't immediately recognize what they were. They were many, numbering near 50. He stared for a while, failing to discern what they might be. Gradually, though, he made sense of it. They were corpses. They looked like husks. In truth, the skin had become so dry it cracked at every point, curling inwards to reveal what lay within. Their mouths had not a hint of saliva, and they had shrunk so small that they could not weigh more than 50 pounds, even the largest of them. The flesh fell away at points, revealing petrified organs or bone. Wind carried bits of them away as little more than dust. It smelled of nothing. Argrave supposed that without liquids in them, it had no reason to smell of anything. It was a vaguely disconcerting sight, but Argrave had been through the low way, and was not as fazed as badly as he might have been months ago. He looked to Guilliman, understanding what had made the elven vampire bothered so. They were executing them. "Earlier," Guilliman said. "I see, now, why you warned us against touching others' skin." Argrave said nothing, turning his head back. He intended to look for only a bit longer and then move on, but he spotted someone standing by the chairs, and they locked eyes. Mistress Tasha smiled when she saw Argrave and moved forward. The crowd parted for her, and she came to stand before Argrave. "Hello," she greeted happily. "A pleasant surprise, seeing you again." Her tone was jarring in the wake of the husks on the chairs, but Argrave managed to return her greeting, saying, "Yes, hello, Mistress Tasha. Titus will depart soon, I suspect. He sells much of the dye we use for clothes, so we interact on occasion," she noted, touching her purple dress. "You were on your way to meet him, I suspect?" "That's right," Argrave answered quietly with a nod. He looked past her. "What happened here?" "This?" She looked around, as though it wasn't immediately obvious what he was referring to. The jails were beginning to grow full. I decided to clear them out, stop procrastinating. A terrible habit of mine, you see." Tasha laughed lightly. "What did these people do?" Argrave questioned. "You should know it well," Mistress Tasha returned. "Some stole, some used magic within the city, some committed violence, some refused to pay their taxes, some dared to blaspheme against our Fellhorn. Yet most tried to provide subsistence to those outside the city. The tribals, many convert falsely, and then try to subvert our authority." She placed a hand on her hip and turned around. "When we welcome someone into our cities, we vessels." She strode up to someone in a crowd and tore them from the crowd, a red-robed woman. "Make them take Fellhorn unto themselves." She pulled back the person's sleeve, revealing a cross with 4 X's on the tips etched in a strange, shimmering blue ink. It looked like the person had sapphires in their skin, almost, but Argrave knew it was magic. Mistress Tasha released the person, who quickly cradled her wrist and returned to the crowd. "We know when they transgress. Yet if they are not reminded of this, they think we do not." She stepped back up to Argrave. "Everyone needs a reminder, Wouldn't you agree? Argrave bit his lip for a second, not answering. Then, he slowly nodded. I think I understand. Good, she nodded. When you return from Argent, I would love to host you once more. Your stories were quite fascinating. Maybe so, Argrave responded in non-committal language. I look forward to it, she beamed, blue eyes shimmering against the dawn light. Good luck on your journey. Welcome to the burnt desert, and please, make the most of your time here. Mistress Tasha walked away. Argrave swallowed his saliva, especially conscious of the fact he had spit to swallow as he stared at those husks. He turned back to Annalise and Guilliman, and said, come on, let's get going. Argrave sat atop a velvet cushion, a book in his hand. He couldn't read it, though. He simply stared out across the dunes of black sand, watching the road pass them by. Their caravan was hauled by 4 dark brown camels over the soulstone road of the burnt desert. They wouldn't be able to ride this thing the whole way, but it would take them far enough. Comfortable caravan, Argrave noted, turning away from the black sand. Guilliman nodded. Annalise stayed silent, staring out. Look, I think their message was pretty clear. Argrave looked back out across the dunes. Might have been for her citizens, but doubtless Tasha sought to give that message to us, too. Indeed, Annalise agreed. Fall in line, obey, and we will be treated fairly, even luxuriously. Transgress but slightly, and no mercy will be shown. And can you do that, both of you? Argrave sought to confirm. Yes, Guilliman answered without hesitating. Annalise did not answer so quickly. Garm, though, added, I have no sympathy for any of them. They're fools, unable to accept they've lost, unable to embrace the winners. The terms are fair, if merciless. Break no laws. Submit to Fellhorn. End of story. Argrave glanced at Garm, acknowledging the point of his cynicism. Well, be that as it may, I can't imagine I'd like to live under these people. Delphasium is probably the best among them to live. The deeper we go, the worse it'll get. It would be difficult to remove them from power. They are deeply entrenched, supported by legions of people, and are possessed of a strange magic beyond magic. Annalise tapped her finger against her temple as she thought. And at the end of it, we receive the gratitude of a people who refuse to ask for help, who refuse to ask for aid. I cannot suspect they would express their gratitude easily. Nor are they in a position to do so. Indeed, the vessels may be more likely to offer aid against Gerectic Kiet than any of the southern tribals. Argrave furrowed his brows, not expecting this sort of talk from Annalise. I see why you want to stay out of this. Annalise looked to Argrave. And I think that it's the smart thing to do. We should stay this course. Once you become black-blooded, we will leave this place. I'm pleased you agree, Argrave said uneasily. But I am not especially fond of it, she said, voice distant. I liked it here. There is an austere beauty to these dunes. I dislike seeing it ruled by those who could not care about its future, its people. Yeah. Argrave replied with one nod. But part of me wonders if I'm losing a bit of the big picture. How so? Annalise came back to attention. We are incapable of changing things here, Argrave said plainly. This isn't a people struggling against the vessels. The vessels have already won. They control the burnt desert. There is no other faction. Argrave took a breath and exhaled. And yet. Well, who is to say we can't foster a seed of resistance? Who's to say this won't happen at Argent? I did mention I had to cause a little trouble, after all. Annalise tilted her head. You mean to say, someday, when the world has settled, we will return, and with a different intent in mind? Argrave smiled. Could be. Then I shall hold you to that, Argrave. She stared at him. I shall hold my tongue and enjoy of this place what I can. Yes, you're all saints, mocked Garm. Save the poor, downtrodden tribals. Protect them from themselves, please. He scoffed. The world doesn't run like that. Argrave turned to him. And how does it run? He patiently indulged. It runs on selfishness. Everyone's self-serving. If the roles were reversed, these southern tribals would be trampling on the vessels like dogs. Argrave laughed. Great theory. But funnily enough, the vessels came to power because the southern tribals welcomed them with open arms. Over the years, though, the vessels grew in number and monopolized the resources, subverting tribes with their own towns and cities. Garm looked up at Argrave. All that proves is that selflessness just gets you nothing but misery. I suppose I'll have to find out, Argrave mused, his mood undampened by Garm's unrelenting pessimism. It'll be too late for you by the time you find out, Garm said bitterly. Argrave looked at the severed head. You sound miffed. You want to look out the window? He questioned. What? Garm looked at Argrave incredulously. And let me be spotted? Come on, insisted Argrave. It's got to be boring, staring at a velvet cushion all day. Here. What are you? Garm trailed off as Argrave picked him up and positioned him just right to see the outside. There, Argrave finished. This isn't necessary, Garm said monotonously. It's unnecessary, in fact. Chapter 112, Ensnared. A fire crackled, sending smoke up into the night sky. For the first time in a long while, Argrave sat before a man-made campfire instead of one born of magic. The flame was contained in a bowl of some sort that seemed to be resistant to heat and kept aflame by chopped logs. Above it, goat meat sizzled, dripping fatty grease into the fire which would let out a cascade of sparks. Argrave and Annalise sat near, each using the campfire to read. Gilliman had his back turned to the flame, watching out into the fading light of dusk. His helmet was off, disguising calm from sight atop Gilliman's backpack. Across from them sat Titus, the leader of the merchant caravan. Titus was taller than most, just shy of Annalise's height, and had a body clearly adjusted to physical labor. He had golden eyes and dark skin, marking him as a former tribal. Argrave found that, in the 3 days they had been journeying, he wore only extravagant red and gold clothing. He displayed the mark of Fellhorn, leaving the blue cross on his backhand exposed. N0vlisp.C0m. That should be sufficient, Titus narrated as he leaned forward, gingerly seizing the skewered meat steak. He lifted it up, taking it off the flame. Annalise shut her book eagerly, placing it inside her bag. Argrave took his time, watching Titus set things up. Titus reached off the side and retrieved 4 thin yet wide purple leaves. These are the leaves of the bitterbite. It is said if one eats too many, they will lose their taste. Yet I have had thousands, and they do nothing. Worry not, gentlemen. Madame, Titus spoke smoothly. Just call us by name. Argrave held his hand out. The term might apply to me, but Gilliman definitely isn't gentle. I would not dare show disrespect to one who dined with Mistress Stacia. Titus quickly refuted at once. Argrave didn't press the issue further. Titus wrapped the goat meat in the leaf, and then slowly pulled it free of the skewer. The leaf of a bitterbite has tangy juices that go well with the spice. Please, gentlemen. Madame, enjoy the first bite. He held out the leaf-wrapped meat, and Argrave touched Annalise's elbow, gesturing for her to take it. She took it, holding it in hand but waiting to take a bite. Titus diligently wrapped another piece of meat, offering it to Argrave. Argrave took it, refraining as well. The gentleman Gilliman? Titus questioned. He has his strange ways of eating, Argrave interrupted. He packs his own food and throws a tantrum if he cannot eat it his way. Don't mind him. Ah. Certainly. Titus nodded. He bit into his wrapped meat, and only once he had chewed and swallowed did Annalise and Argrave do so, as well. Argrave knew the leaf itself was not hazardous, but some caution was warranted with a stranger. The leaf added a flavor reminiscent of lime to the meat, though it was much fainter than the fruit might have been. Annalise seemed to enjoy it. Argrave didn't find it terrible, but frankly he'd rather just eat the meat as it was. That said, Titus' skills were impressive. The burnt desert certainly had cuisine far beyond that of Vasca, at least in Argrave's opinion. On the morrow, Titus looked out across the dunes of sand. I suspect we will reach Malgeridum by this time. The mining city? Argrave questioned. That's good. Fast progress. Hopefully we aren't blocked by another sandstorm. The gentleman knows the city, Titus noted, minutely surprised. Yeah. Prime example of Fellhorn's infinite generosity, Argrave said sarcastically. Titus said nothing, staring into the fire. Argrave and Annalise sat in silence. You were a tribal once, right? Argrave questioned. Yes, Titus confirmed. Now you're working underneath Mistress Stacia as a merchant, Argrave followed up. Titus nodded in confirmation this time. Your life before, your life now, which would you want to go back to? Titus laughed. The gentleman asks me to choose between starvation and servitude. He looked up at Argrave, his golden eyes reflecting the fire well. I was born when our tribe was already dead. The tales my elders spoke of, glorious battle against the men of Vasca, where strength ruled the desert, where we toppled great beasts and rode wyverns across the sandy skies. They were ever just tales, to me. So you like it underneath the vessels? Argrave questioned. Titus grabbed an iron rod and shifted one of the logs aside, staring at the crackling flame. I know suffering with an empty stomach, and I know life underneath Fellhorn's eternal reign. They are different in many ways, similar in some. He stabbed the iron rod back in the sand. In both, you grow used to loss. Death? Annalise pressed, moving closer to the fire. Yes, Titus nodded. Random death. Outside the walls, tragedy can strike at any moment, rotting from within, succumbing to that without. The burnt desert is not an easy place to live. Yet within the walls. Titus rubbed his hands together near the fire. The vessels need to drain to grow in power, be it from the people or from the world. They constantly hunger for their people to infract, hoping to grow their vessel with our lifeblood. Some are no different from the accursed bloodsuckers that prowl the night, pressing and pushing the people until a mistake is made. It is a hunt of a different kind. Argrave's gaze briefly flitted to Gilliman when accursed bloodsuckers were mentioned, but he had tact enough to not let his eyes linger long. The only way to ensure your continued existence is to make yourself valuable. Titus held out his hand. And the vessels of Fellhorn, how are they made? Annalise inquired curiously. Some babies are taken at birth. Titus rubbed his hands together. It is rarely a welcome thing, and so most resist. It usually ends in the family's death, especially if they were once tribal. Torchlight, interrupted Gilliman loudly. In the distance, Titus came to attention, standing and walking to where Gilliman sat. He kneeled, looking out into the horizon. After a time, Titus said, I see them. The gentleman has excellent eyesight. My compliments. Looks like they're heading towards something. A spring in the rocks, Gilliman noted. Tribals, probably. They have buckets. Spring in the rocks? Argrave asked, also standing and watching. He could see nothing for a time, until he caught a faintly flickering light in the far distance. Glimmin confirmed with a grunt. Is it a perfect circle of small stones? Is the one big rock jutting up in the back? Glimmin moved his head around, scanning. Eventually, he nodded. Seems so. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's no oasis. It's a brandback. Titus did not turn his head away as he complimented. The gentleman has a deep knowledge of the desert. I am consistently surprised. Brandback? Annalise asked. Big lizard thing. It burrows into the sand backwards, opens its mouth a little, and lets its saliva pool. When something steps near to drink, it opens its mouth fully and swallows them whole. Argrave scratched his cheek. Those people are probably done for if they're going for it. They know it is there, Titus stated. The brandback. What? Argrave questioned. What makes you say that? These people have decided to choose death before enslavement, Titus concluded simply. But how can you? No men of a tribe would not know of a brandback. Titus watched passively. In the far distance, a burst of black sand exploded into the air like a geyser. Once the sand cleared, a thick, fat lizard creature plopped onto the sand, its entire body covered in black, rock-like bumps. It threw its head with its throat swelled like a pelican. Something clearly stuck in there. After a time, it settled, its reptilian head glancing from place to place. It slunk off into the distance, using the last light of dusk to find its path. One escaped, Glimmin noted. His bucket is full. Yet he isn't drinking it. He will return to his tribe. Titus stood from where he knelt. The hunter may only eat when he delivers his prize before the tribe. Saliva? Some prize? Garm spoke, causing Argrave's uneasiness to rise. Titus looked back. I said, that's some prize. Argrave quickly covered. Only they can know their triumph. Titus looked back out. Elias is coming here, is he? Indune smiled. With his pretty betrothed? Rydia of Just is not coming, my prince. The royal knight shook his head. A shame. Truly a shame, Indune said, though his joy was not dampened. Will we try and kill them? Capture them? Indune finished. Of course not. Why would we do that? All the beautiful work we've been doing here would be ruined. Duke Meroch's reputation is the worst it has ever been. An incident like that might evoke some pity for the fat pig and his whore wife. The royal knight seemed a little relieved. Severian. Indune continued, walking across their in-room to another knight. From what you tell me, 2 people are spearheading the people in protest of Duke Meroch. No? Yes, my prince, the knight answered uneasily. A local priest of Gale, god of justice, and a prominent merchant who was badly affected by the malfeasance we unearthed. That's good. 2 will be better. The prince smiled broadly. Here's what you 2 are to do. I wish for all of you to find a knight within Duke Meroch's retinue with a similar build to your own. If no such person exists, make do. Indune waved his hand. We'll have them killed, impersonated by you on another day. Surely royal knights will have no trouble with this. And then, my prince? Severin asked cautiously. The day Elias arrives, and he's led into Duke Meroch's castle. Indune held his hand out and clenched it tight. All of you will seize the 2 dissidents. The priest of Gale. And that merchant. Publicly execute them. Make sure that it's as brutal and unjust as possible. The royal knights had not expected things to take this turn. I learned something at Dirika, Indune mused, turning around and walking to the window. The people can be a force greater than the nobles, if angered. The people love the Margrave. And their love, I'll take it from them. It should belong to me, but it doesn't. Not yet, anyway. He held his hand to the window. All love a hero. My enemy is Parban, with their centuries-old reputation of honor and justice. I'll take everything from them, material, immaterial, it matters none. That situation will be dangerous for us, my prince. Even for you. It will surely cause chaos, one knight warned. Indune turned and stalked over to the one who had spoken. Have you gained no courage? We, alone, stormed a castle and killed its lord. And we, alone, will do this. He tapped the knight's chest piece. If a spindly bastard can flip the duke against me, I can undo that just as easily. He stepped away, walking about as though to calm himself. He paused and glanced at Severin. And what news have you on that front, Severin? What has my sister promised to do regarding the bastard? Severin looked as though he loathed to speak, but eventually, he disclosed quietly. The princess said that he was last seen at Richmond and has no news on that front. Indune pursed his lips, and then shook his head in dismissal. Fine. Inform me of anything new. For now, we will continue to sow dissent while we wait for Elias. Perhaps the Margrave's son will die. That would certainly be interesting. Chapter 113, Malgeridum. Delphasium, Mistress Tasha's town, could not be called grand in scale, though the shining marble streets inside made it seem like a pearl amidst the desert. That place was far behind them, and Argrave felt it had been a suitable welcome to the burnt desert. The mining city, Malgeridum, was giant compared to Delphasium, yet it lacked the magnificence the simple trading town had. It stood at the point where the sand dunes began to fade in way of hills of black rock and dirt. cratered deep into the earth. It had walls, but the city itself was so much lower than the surrounding terrain it was difficult to spot them from a distance. The first thing most would spot was rising smoke from the ever-burning furnaces, and the tarps waving in the wind to ward off sand. The road to Malgeridum forked into two separate entrances, each for a distinct district. One district was obviously more maintained than the other, made for residential use, while the other was for labor and production. Argrave and his company stood beside Titus' carriage, their bags fully packed. They would separate here. Argrave would head for the residential district while Titus would depart for the production district. What's this? Argrave held a thick round metal disc. It had 8 triangles spaced equidistantly on the edge. A parting gift for the gentleman, Titus explained. I understand that the esteemed persons will be traveling to Argent. Even for those who have traveled there before, the dunes and the hills stretch on forever. Titus looked out to the desert behind Argrave. Just as a sailor must use the stars and a compass to mark their path across the ocean, so, too, must men in the burnt desert use a compass to traverse this sea of black sand. Argrave finally figured things out, and he flipped open the disc's lid, revealing a bit of glassware above a simple magnetized needle. The cardinal directions were marked. This is... Argrave looked down at it. Damn, I feel pretty stupid. I was worrying about how I was going to find my way around in case things went sour, but... guess I forgot these stupid things existed. Argrave laughed and shook his head. I appreciate this. It's a very considerate gift. I don't know what I did to deserve it. Exactly. Don't you need it? Titus scratched the back of his neck, embarrassed. It's an old thing, in truth, one that I used long ago. But it's reliable, and I believe that's the most important thing. Argrave nodded and closed the lid with his thumb. You're a nice guy, Titus. The gentleman was entertaining and polite, rare company for a merchant as me, and... he stepped away, retrieving a simple red cloth wrapped around something rectangular. Here, the madam expressed enjoyment of the bitter bite leaves, and so I took the liberty to prepare some. Please. He held them out to Annalise. She took them from his hands. Such a thoughtful gift. She smiled warmly. Argrave felt something unpleasant in his chest, and he found himself stepping forward between the two of them. So, you're headed to the production district to unload things? He addressed Titus. Yes, my men and I will be headed that way, Titus confirmed. I apologize, but I could not think of a gift for the second gentleman. Guilliman shook his head. I have all I need. I appreciate all you've done. Argrave held his hand out, holding 10 gold coins in hand stacked atop each other. Here. I know you didn't ask, but don't refuse. Titus blinked for a moment, biting his lips in clear hesitance. Eventually, Argrave grabbed his wrist and dropped the coins in his hand. The gentleman is generous, Titus sighed. May your days be vigorous, and your nights tranquil. He placed his hand on his chest and bowed deeply. Maybe not too vigorous, Argrave said musingly. I wish you well. Titus straightened, nodded, and whistled with his fingers. At once, his men spurred the camel forward, and they moved down the road, heading for the production district. Argrave watched their caravan move away, feeling a little bit empty. Can talk again. Finally, Garm veritably shouted. Argrave turned to Guilliman and looked past, seeing the gleaming black and gold eyes hiding behind Guilliman's helmet atop his backpack. He really leaves himself open for low blows. So much mean stuff I can say in response to that. You did well, Argrave said instead, turning away to the mining city ahead. Even still, we have to get inside quickly, find a place to stay. Don't want to linger in this city long. Not the same type of place as Delphasium. Malgeridum possessed the bare essential qualities of a city. The word barren was the best fit to describe the place. The vessels in this city were not so liberal with their resources, not a drop of water could be found anywhere, and every field of crops had tall fences with guards stationed. People lined up outside a stately building, tokens in their hands. The tokens marked hours worked, and the people would exchange them for their necessities. The streets were made of hardened black clay and each building was packed very closely together, enough so that people could not walk side by side in some areas. A few of the buildings were small enough that Argrave could see the roof if he craned his neck a little. It made traversing the place difficult, at times, because the population in the place was quite densely packed. The walls on the outside of the city were not as tall as those in Delphasium, and consequently, the place was filled with black sand blown in from the dunes they had come from. There was a strange, industrial scent hanging about most of the air from the mines, furnaces, and forges, and Argrave was glad that his lungs had recovered from that disease he'd caught in the lowway. Most people walked about with cloth about their face to protect their airways, and Argrave found himself doing the same. But as they pushed past the decrepit clay houses, eventually the streets opened to accommodate the wealthier residents of the city, vessels, and their trusted aides. The well-maintained streets lined with orderly estates were like night and day when compared to the hovels they had come from. Here, this place, Argrave pointed out a gated area. Tents lined the courtyards, each occupied by large beds. Luxury brothel, as I remember, but it'll rent rooms to foreigners. Other places won't. Argrave walked to the gate, where 2 men stood on guard. Hello, he greeted. Like to rent a room for the 3 of us. That possible? The guard looked up at Argrave, casting a glance to his fellow. It will cost much, he cautioned. Foreigners. bring trouble. Name a price. Argrave held his hands out. In the northern coin? The guard questioned, and Argrave nodded. 100 gold, including food. Argrave widened his eyes. 1 night, 100 gold for 3? For each, the guard corrected. Argrave placed his hand to his forehead. He knew he didn't have that much, at least not in pure gold. It wasn't enough to warrant using a rose gold coin, either. Even if he cared to use the larger currency, the people here would probably bilk him on that front, vastly understating the value of the rose gold magic coin. You do realize we're not asking for your primary services, right? Just need a place to sleep? Argrave questioned. The master stated this price, gentlemen, the guard stated passively. Argrave sighed, turning around. He had his hand to his chin. Guilliman, get my lockbox, if you please. He turned back to the man. Tell the masters I run I'd like to work out a price in something other than gold. Argrave sat on a comfortable cushy chair, sitting straight as he tapped his finger against his temple impatiently. Guilliman stood behind him, at the ready, while Annalise sat in another chair nearby, eyes darting from place to place. They were beneath the canopy in the center of the brothel, surrounded by the employees and the customers. To say the very least of the sights, Argrave agreed with the assessment of luxurious. Argrave tapped her elbow with the back of his hand. What are you looking around for? I think you should know by now, she returned easily. Merely interested. With no retort, Argrave shook his head, waiting. My mother very nearly took employment at a place like this once. When she was at Berenda, she was offered a very tantalizing sum, so she said. Argrave frowned. Glad she didn't. You dislike places like these, Annalise noted. Empty pleasures and venereal diseases, that's all you'll get here, Argrave said, waving his hand in dismissal. Guilliman grunted in agreement. But people will always desire this sort of thing, Annalise rebutted. It would be best if, not now, all right? Argrave held up a hand to stop her. The guy's coming. Master Zyron, a short and well-groomed man, strode across the brothel and entered beneath the canopy. He was a vessel, lacking a mark on the back of his hand, and with the same wet skin the others displayed. He wore flashy clothing with too many colors and sashes to count, golden jewelry dangling from his neck, ears, and fingers, probably enough metal to add 15 pounds to him. Zyron held his hands out, jewelry jingling against each other. Greetings, foreigners. My guardsmen tell me you have something to offer me. Yes, that's right, Argrave confirmed, standing. Please, sit. He stopped Argrave, himself moving to sit across from their party. Trade is simple. We have plenty of gemstones here. Argrave touched his lockbox as he sat down. We'd like a room for 3, preferably secluded, preferably quiet. No need for any services, Argrave emphasized. Just a nice place to sleep. Gemstones, is it? Zyron leaned back in his chair. Sir, you do realize this is a mining town, no? Gold, gemstones. We have been blessed with abundance here in Malgeridum. Not pearls, though. Argrave held out a finger. Zyron paused for a long moment, but quickly recovered, added, even if pearls, don't do that, Argrave interrupted. I know you have gemstones of all types, rubies, sapphires, emeralds, so much so that this little city is a geological miracle. I'm not even sure those jewels are supposed to form so closely together, but what do I know? Argrave spread his hands out. But pearls. No oceans, no water for miles and miles. Pearls are a very rare commodity here. Zyron said nothing, and so Argrave took the opportunity to lean in. Adorn a few of your courtesans with pearls. This place will be the talk of the city. Argrave flipped open the lockbox, ensuring the lid blocked Zyron's vision. He retrieved 5 pearls carefully, placing them in between his fingers. Give us a room, plus a suitable sum of gold coins minted in the burnt desert. And I've got plenty of pearls. Zyron entwined his hands, staring at Argrave. It was a pleasant trade, Argrave said happily, loading the gold coins into his lockbox. Zyron had given their party coins minted right here in Malgeridum, which would doubtless make things much easier in future visits. The coins were smaller, Argrave found, and they had plenty for the future. A few of my girls will escort the 3 of you to your room, Zyron informed, wiping the round pearls free of blemishes. If you'd like, I can send some to provide services, as well, free of charge. Naturally. Not a chance, Argrave dismissed immediately. Yes. Most investors are like that, I find, Zyron commented woefully. No matter. Be careful not to wander outside. The gates will remain open, but things are not at ease in Malgeridum presently. Not at ease? Argrave questioned. What's wrong? A revolt in the production district. Zyron shook his head. The fools seized a supplely depot. This is where the citizens receive food and water in return for their labor. That won't last long, though, will it? Argrave questioned. Those places aren't very big. 3 days of supplies, maybe more. True, Zyron nodded. And most vessels have agreed to wait them out, cordon the place off and count it as a loss until the fools themselves submit to be drained, or until they try and move. A bit slow moving, but it works. Argrave said distantly. Well, I hadn't planned on going out anyway. Please, take us to our rooms. Certainly, Zyron gestured towards his girls. East wing. The hidden tryst room. Take them, quickly, he directed. Argrave followed, feeling a strange sense of unease at the news. Chapter 114, Watershow. The hidden tryst room was, as it turned out, a place with only one massive bed. It was large enough to accommodate 10 people easily. The three of them had traveled together long enough that such a thing didn't really cause a problem. The lowway had dissolved all boundaries. Argrave set Garm up with a book, and the head used simply rank magic to turn pages. The room was well cleaned, it smelled nice, and the bed was soft. A pleasant place, by all standards. The room wasn't why Argrave had difficulty sleeping. His mind twisted and turned every which way, thinking about both what was ahead and behind. Once he'd fallen asleep, he'd been disturbed by a nightmare. He had been crucified inside a hole, and the guardians of the lowway shoveled flesh-eating worms at him that burrowed into his flesh. By the time he'd woken up, his body looked like Swiss cheese. It had been impossible to go to sleep after that, so Argrave sat beside Garm, reading. The bronze hand mirror rested facing upwards on the table to remind Argrave of his duty. Just beside it was another mirror, though it showed Argrave instead of the game status interface. It had been a while since he'd studied himself. His obsidian-color hair was much longer, nearing the shoulders at this point, yet there was still nary a speck of facial hair. It was difficult to say if he looked more or less healthy, though his skin was more colorful. His eyes looked tired and his cheeks were as sunken as ever. Argrave, Glimmin called out quietly. Argrave looked up. Glimmin had his breastplate over his chest, but it wasn't strapped properly. Glimmin pointed to the strap and beckoned Argrave over. With a sigh, he placed a bookmark in his book and then moved to help. "Let me help my lady with her dress," Argrave said with half-hearted mockery. "Sand is the scourge of steel," Glimmin said. "I have to be diligent with my maintenance." There, Argrave pulled the strap tight, then locked it in place. "My lady's corset is tightened, and I tied the lace." Glimmin turned his head back and stared at Argrave. A snicker drew both of their attention, but Garm quickly quieted down. Annalise woke up at that point, sprawled out across the bed beneath its blankets. She blinked for a few moments, taking things in, deciding to commit to waking up. She stretched out, grunting. She sat up in the bed, her long white hair in disarray and her face slack. Argrave found himself smiling. "She has risen, rejoice." He stepped up to the table, picking up his book and turning around. "We should get ready to go. But before we do, I'd like to check out the production district, get some updates on the revolt that's happening." "What for?" Annalise questioned, voice different in light of her recent awakening. "Just bothering me, that's all," Argrave answered distantly. "Leave our stuff. If there's one thing we can count on, it's that no one will steal here in this place, especially not a vessel. We saw the fate of those that do." "Am I stuff?" asked Garm. "That's up to you," Argrave answered quickly. "We'll get ready. Make your choice by then." "This is fine by me." Annalise rubbed her eyes. "I hope that man, Titus, did not get embroiled in this." Argrave looked at her, sharing her worry. "Something tells me he did," Annalise sighed, crawling off the bed before rising to her feet. "You're here." "Good," Zyran noted, garbed in vainglorious white clothing. "I had intended to have one of my girls inform you. But if you're here, that saves me the trouble." Argrave stepped into the main room of the brothel, his companions with him. Garm had elected to come along, and so Gilliman hauled his pack to give credence to the disguise. The air was strange. Neither guest nor prostitute seemed particularly focused on the other. That was an unusual thing, given the purpose of the place. "What did you want to tell me?" questioned Argrave, stepping into the room. "Nothing important. I'll be out to deal with something the city deems necessary." "This necessity being?" Argrave pressed. Zyran's workers removed the jewelry on his body diligently, fingers running across his face, arms, and a multitude of other places to free the gold. "My fellow vessels have deemed that the revolt is necessary to suppress with force. I must obey Fellahorn's will." "What changed?" Argrave stepped in front of Zyran. The vessel did not answer, for his workers removed some piercings on his face. "I am unsure. I know only that I was called." "Right." Argrave nodded, mind elsewhere. He stepped aside. At last, Zyran's workers removed his clothes. Argrave kept his gaze upwards. The vessel's body began to shimmer like wind over a body of water. His flesh liquefied, bursting out into water. Argrave crossed his arms while Annalise and Gilliman stepped back cautiously. The blob of water moved about in front of them, formless yet with purpose. Floating in the middle of the water was a small orb of rapidly moving water. This orb contained a body, a baby, to be precise, and one that seemed to be straight out of the womb judging by size alone. The water surged forth with ludicrous speed, leaving nothing behind. The baby in the orb stayed in the center, pulled along with a mass of water. Annalise stepped up the spot Zyran had left, pointing with mouth open wide in surprise. "Was that a baby?" "I don't think Zyran is especially infantile," Argrave said trolley. "You know what Yes, that was the figure of a baby." Argrave cut her off. "Titus told you that they choose vessels at birth. That baby is their true body and sole vulnerability in that immaterial state. I told you about their magic, didn't I?" "I guess seeing is believing." "Troubling," noted Gilliman. "I don't get it either." Argrave shook his head, staring at Zyron's workers as they moved away carrying his jewelry and clothing. The body we see when they're walking about is what that baby would look like grown. When they're physically manifested like that, they can be injured normally. Argrave pointed where Zyron had exited. They go like that when they intend on fighting. I'm told it's taxing, so they don't do it often. Is Ebonice truly effective against them? Glimmin touched his axe. I told you it was, Argrave said. The water falls away like... Well, water, upon contact. Wouldn't use it to block attacks, though. Would probably break the axe. Regardless, we shouldn't need to fight them, he said pointedly, as though in reminder. Annalise took a deep breath and exhaled. And your plan to head into the production district? Unchanged. Argrave stepped forward. All the more reason now. Malgeridum was quiet. The small buildings made it easy to see most of what was happening in the flat city. The constantly billowing smoke they'd been treated to yesterday has ceased. In the far distance at the production district, one could see the magic of the vessels laid plainly. Unnatural tendrils of water danced about the air in ways liquid was not meant to move, unbound by gravity. The water imitated innumerable things: blades, animals, hammers, shields, yet most common was a simple geyser that tore apart walls. The street, people. The harsh industrial scent persisted in the air, and Argrave drew a piece of cloth over his face, tying it quickly. He rose his duster's hood over his head and then gestured to Annalise and Gilliman, urging them to follow. Garm perched on Gilliman's backpack, disguised by his helmet as per usual. All of the people were idle as they watched this suppression happen, so it made traversing the streets difficult. Argrave's party wove through the idle crowds while watching the distant event happening ahead. It was like some terrible mockery of a water show. Less bright lights and beautiful fountains, much more screaming and mayhem. After a long while of threading through the crowd, they made it to an encirclement of guards blocking the people from proceeding further. The guards said nothing to calm or move the crowd, merely stopping them from advancing with a braced posture and a large tower shield. Argrave stepped up to their encirclement, and all the guards near paid special attention to their group. He placed a hand on the top of the shield, trying to look beyond the writhing water. Remove your hand from the shield, foreigner. The shield-bearer spoke. I was told the revolt wasn't worth suppressing. Argrave spoke. What changed? The guardsman looked up at Argrave, staying silent for a moment before spitting. I don't need to answer a northerner. Hurtful. Argrave removed his hand from the shield, covering his chest as though wounded, bandying the N-word about like that. Well, I'm the bigger man, physically and metaphorically, come to think of it, Argrave mused as he reached into his pockets. Hear me out. You might hate northerners. Argrave pulled free some gold coins, having predicted he might need to do something like this. But you won't refuse a rich northerner, I hope. The guard's attention was devoted solely to the coins in Argrave's hand at once, though he didn't reach to take it. Seeing the inaction, Argrave turned his head to the others nearby, who had doubtless heard the exchange. He waved the gold coins about, as though offering it to each. All right, the first guard said, freeing one hand from the shield and moving to take the gold. Argrave shut his hand, holding a finger out to urge him to speak first. The guard sighed, and explained, it wasn't a problem earlier, because the rebels had limited supply. But they got resupplied. He shrugged. That's all I know. Argrave stared down at the masked guardsman for a moment in silence, then opened his hand wordlessly. The guard reached up and took the coins, then continued, saying, could the gentleman give us some space? With a quiet laugh at the change in politeness, Argrave stepped away. His mirth quickly turned into a frown. They walked a fair distance away, where the crowds were not so dense, and Argrave leaned against a wall. Well, the man might as well have said it. Argrave scratched his chin. Annalise stepped up just in front of him. You do think Titus had something to do with this? I don't know. Argrave shook his head. If he was, probably not deliberately. He didn't seem the conscientious objector type. I never saw the cargo he had. We didn't see him load or unload. When things settle, we should go there, Annalise said. Argrave crossed his arms. I didn't realize we were the conscientious objectors, Argrave said incredulously. Listen, Titus was a nice one. But we can't be his keepers. If this is his mess, we can't get involved. Too much at stake. You want to draw the ire of the high-pressure water jets with legs? Hear, hear, spoke Garm from atop Gilliman's backpack. Get out of this hole in the ground. No use getting your shoes wet for strangers. Annalise took a deep breath and exhaled. Both of you are right. She stepped closer to Argrave. At the very least, can we discover what truly happened? Argrave stared at her amber eyes. He stayed silent for a while. This is a slippery slope, Annalise, and I'm not talking about the wet roads, he cautioned. I won't agree with doing anything more than a simple walkthrough of the streets after the chaos has ended. Thank you, she said sincerely, clasping her hands together. I will request nothing more, nor act out of turn. But this, I need to know more. She stepped away. Argrave stayed leaning against the wall, introspecting. Hard to say no to her. At least she's not asking me to buy a poo. Chapter 115, Caged Pride. Once the revolt was suppressed, the people went back to their usual schedule with an odd sense of normalcy, returning to the forges and the mines that they had been operating with an almost routine disappointment. The disappointment didn't seem to stem from the vessel's victory, That seemed an inevitability. Rather, it was almost as though they had been deprived of an interesting happening. As Argrave advanced with Annalise and Gilliman, they were still treated to oddities. The aftermath of the fight left water everywhere in some places, but the puddles on the ground bubbled as though boiling. Minuscule drops rose into the air, seeking out their origin, the vessels of Fellhorn from whence they had been born. Argrave walked aimlessly for a while, observing the carnage alongside all the others. There were bodies to be sure, but most had been captured alive. The vessels drained them. It was a gruesome thing. The vessel would grip their forehead, and then the victim's body would shrink, their skin would crack and curl, and dust would scatter everywhere. The screams made it clear it was not a painless thing. During these executions, the vessels remained the picture of politeness. They would smile or bow at Argrave and Annalise as they stood wrapped in improvised cloth to cover their nude bodies after reversion from their immaterial form. Their propriety served to display they viewed this suppression of dissidents as a triviality. Despite their concerted effort to find Titus, they found not a hint of the man, not his caravan nor his person. If we haven't seen any of him, that's a good portent, no? Argrave asked Annalise as they walked, the water still dancing in the air around them. There is a reason I asked you to do this beyond the mere concern about his well-being, Annalise said, keeping her arms crossed as she advanced. He was especially anticipatory arriving here. As though he had something large planned. Nervous, especially. Meaning? More so than you might expect? Annalise pondered that. I cannot say for sure. Some people are more nervous than others. It may merely be a red herring, Argrave finished, pausing on the road. I do not follow. She paused with him. Gilliman stepped ahead, scanning all nearby warily. Something misleading, Argrave explained quickly. We've been walking around for a while now, though. Are you satisfied enough to move on? Annalise sighed. Yes. Thank you for your indulgence, Argrave. Sure. Let's just not make a habit of overindulging, he said dismissively, turning. We should get moving while the weather is clear. Don't want to deal with another sandstorm. Argrave fell to the sand, black sand billowing past his face. He held Titus' compass in his right hand, while a spell matrix formed in the other. When it materialized, a thin translucent ward spread out, no thicker than a piece of paper, but the whipping sand ceased. Argrave took a few minutes to clear himself of sand, shaking his face and hood to dislodge the small black grains. Annalise and Gilliman came to join Argrave, cooped up beneath his ward. Above and around, the black sand billowed about them. The sandstorm made it seem as though 1,000 mosquitoes moved past them, or as if the night itself made to consume them. Despite Argrave's insistency to move quickly, his haste had only landed them in the middle of the situation he had most been hoping to avoid. The ward abated the sound, creating an odd zone of quiet that was disconcerting when contrasted with the chaos outside. God damn it, sighed Argrave, out of breath and weary. I guess we made good progress. Can't deny I'm struggling, though. Take off the helmet, please, pleaded Garm. Got sand in my nose. Shake me about. Argrave looked over, then stood before either of his companions could do anything. He lifted Gilliman's helmet off, and then did as the severed head bid, spinning and shaking the head about. Stop, stop, he said at once. Gods. Somehow, you're the least gentle one. Are you sand-free? Questioned Argrave. Yes. Just set me down. You have shaky hands. It's called a benign tremor, Argrave said in faux condescension as he fulfilled Garm's request, sticking the stake deep into the sand. After, Argrave fell to the sand, opening up the lid of the compass and moving it to line up properly. We're headed the proper direction? Questioned Gilliman. Yeah, Argrave shut the compass. If I could keep up with you two, might be we'd be at our next stop by now. Unfortunately. Well, you saw. Least you can walk, Garm commented. Argrave ignored the head's comment, feeling that nothing could be achieved by responding to him. He settled down, getting as comfortable as one could atop the sand dune. We can only wait this out, Argrave commented. The other two agreed and took their positions. Silence settled over them as people grew to relax. Argrave stared up at Garm, rubbing his hands together as he deliberated whether or not to say something. The head was ignorant of his gaze, for he faced forward. Garm. Argrave broke the silence. What? Argrave adjusted himself so that he could look at the head. What are your plans for regaining your body? Garm's eyes fell upon Argrave, unshaking. After a long while without an answer, Argrave continued, because I don't see a way forward for you. And what would you know? Garm retorted at once. Some half-baked C-rank mage, never dipped a finger into necromancy. Argrave chuckled quietly, lowering his head. Necromancy's all but died out as a school of magic. The only practitioners remaining are criminals and exiles. Argrave looked up to meet Garm's gaze. Not exactly people you'd trust with your soul. Doubly so when they realize the value of what's in your head. So what? Garm pressed. I have nothing but time. My point is. Argrave sat cross-legged. You will never be able to fix this problem on your own. You are limited as you are now. Real keen insight. The severed head has limited options, Garm mocked. Back at the low way, you said that you had to be adaptable, Argrave recounted. I haven't seen any of that, since all I've seen is a stubborn adhesion to this mire you've been forced into. Garm closed his eyes. What do you want from me? Openness? Honesty? He said with disdain. I can't teach you spells. I can't inscribe them, In case you haven't realized, I can give guidance for what you already have, and nothing more. I don't know what I want from you, confessed Hargrave. Garm kept his eyes closed, and silence settled within the ward once more. Hargrave recast the spell so that no sand would leak, waiting. Why did you come to this place? Garm finally opened his eyes, staring at Hargrave passively. I can't discern that. To fix my body. I get sick easily, Hargrave answered after a moment's pause. How? Garm continued. We have to get one more item. The Wraith's Heart. Hargrave flipped open the compass, mentally routing the path to Argent based on his memories of the game's map. After that, we have to go talk to an alchemist living elsewhere in the burnt desert. He'll make me black-blooded. So, this alchemist promised to cure for you, provided you collect some artifacts for him. The Unsullied Knife. The Crimson Wellspring, Garm tried to conclude. Hargrave shook his head. Never met this alchemist. Few people remember his name, and he doesn't know these artifacts even exist. But I know he can and will fix the problems I'm dealing with. Hargrave settled back comfortably. So, you're delusional, Garm posited as though he'd finally figured things out. Maybe. Care to make a bet? Hargrave smirked. I know a little too much about a lot of things. What I just outlined. I bet everything will happen the way I say it will. There might be some twists and turns along the way, but by and large, all that I say is true. Garm furrowed his brows, but Hargrave was certain there was some intrigue on his face. What are you trying to convey to me, here? The things I know, and I do mean know, aren't limited to Gerektik Kiet's coming. Hargrave leaned in a bit closer to Garm. If you want some proof of Gerektik Kiet, I can't offer that. You'll come to know in the future, naturally, but I can't give you anything now. Because you're delusional, Garm concluded, repeating his earlier observation. Believe what you want. If there's one thing I can't control, it's what's in your head. Hargrave tapped his temple. But there is one thing I can offer you. I can promise you'll see some proof that my knowledge is genuine. At the very least, you've already seen some of it. You'll see a hell of a lot more in the future. For the first time that Hargrave could recall, Garm looked overwhelmed. Hargrave laid down against the black sand, staring up at the writhing sandstorm. He kicked his feet back and closed his eyes, letting out a self-satisfied sigh. In the corner of a ridiculously luxurious room, there was a man with a rather large frame leaning up against the wall. He sat atop a bed, listlessly staring out the window at the setting suns. Despite the luxury of the room, he was extremely emaciated, his skin drawn tight against his bones. His hair was long and uncut, shining like blood against the sunlight. His eyes shone like two rubies. The rattling of metal echoed out across the room, and the man's head turned. He pushed away from the wall, moving to sit at the edge of the bed with a weary caution. After a long time of shaking, a final click echoed out, and a large metal door opened up. A knight stepped into the room, each step slow and cautious. He came to stand in the center. For some reason, his breath was labored. You're not one of the guards, the red-haired man spoke, his voice hoarse and tired. The man removed his gauntlet and pulled free a dagger. He took 2 unsteady steps forward. I see, said the man sitting. You're here to kill me. Don't make any noise, the knight said, though his voice was strained and shaky. I can't comply with that, said the emaciated man, though he did not move to call for help. Why are you doing this? Do you hate House Parban? Do you have another reason? The knight froze like a child caught doing something bad. At least answer the man you're to kill, Bruno of Parban said. Why are you doing this? My family, the knight sputtered. I have to, he said with conviction and desperation. I have to. They threatened them. Bruno nodded, brows furrowed in understanding. Who? I. The knight stepped forward, holding the knife and breathing quickly. Bruno stood up. He was much taller than the man and had great presence despite his emaciated state. You don't know, do you? The knight wordlessly pointed the knife at Bruno, his training enabling him to keep a steady hand. If you want to save your family, I won't fight back. Bruno spread his arms. I never had any hope of getting out of this alive. Let my life save others, at the very least. I know enough of politics to know that my brother will only benefit if I die. Vasco will lose a card. Chaos will seize the northern lands. A noble murdered under house arrest. Such a thing is an affront to the oaths between monarch and lord. The knight's breathing grew more erratic, and he stepped forward. Bruno turned around, and knelt on the floor. He sat, head held high, neck clearly exposed. Just do it, Bruno said with conviction. Ensure, at least, you keep your family safe henceforth. The knight's breathing slowed and steadied. He took a step forward, the knife raised into the air. The knight struck out at Bruno's neck with all the speed of a snake, and the room was dyed crimson. Chapter 116. Expedience. The Dragon Palace, seat of House Vasca, moved as though it was a beehive with a bear on the outside. Officials, guards, and royal knights flowed quickly, each with their own purpose and with a sense of urgency. Diplomats met couriers, frantically reading and writing letters to send off to Vasca's supporters. Royal knights obeyed commands from their commanders, each seeking different leads on the murder of Bruno of Parban. One person waded through the crowd with slow, steady steps. Royal knights bearing golden armor pushed through the crowd, acting as a wedge for their master. King Felipe III towered above all present, and though he was broad already, His veritable mane of graying obsidian hair doubled his presence. He had grey eyes as steady as stone, and a beard all the way to his stomach. He wore elaborate black and gold armor that could nearly be called ceremonial, though enchantments on its surface bolstered its protective ability. A black mantle bearing a golden snake wrapped around a sword hung from his shoulders, barely touching the ground. King Felipe moved through his courtiers, breathing steady and step calm. He stepped through the Dragon Palace, walked up the stairs leading to his throne, and then moved past it into a large meeting hall. A single large table stood at the center, with innumerable maps played out across its surface. A thin, tall man waited politely in the room, his hands behind his rigid back. He had black hair kept diligently trimmed and rich blue eyes. His clothes were fanciful and bore the black and gold of House Vasca. He had sharp, sunken features, with a stern air about him that commanded some mystique. King Felipe stepped into the room, looking about. "Guard the room," he directed his knights as he stepped forward. The man placed his hand to his chest. "Father," he greeted, dipping his head. "Levin, despite my direction, you've still not improved your magic." King Felipe came to stand before his son. "Even my mistake shows better results than you. Some are unsuited for standing on the front lines." "I know my place," Prince Levin said smoothly. Felipe stared down contemptuously but shook his head and said nothing more on the matter. "Tell me what you've uncovered." Levin readily launched into explanation, saying, "The one responsible for organizing the event has been detained. The one who ordered this remains unknown." Levin said disappointedly. "The maid, Threes, has some connections to House Parban. Her house originates from a cadet branch of their house. She served in the palace, attending to many courtiers." Felipe moved to stand over the maps on the table, staring down at the uneven rectangular continent of Berenda. "We allowed a cadet branch of House Parban in the palace? Her relation was so distant none considered it would hold bearing," Levin explained. "And nothing of her backing?" Felipe continued. "Under torture, she revealed all the information she knew. They led to dead ends. Her contacts fled, abandoning her. She will be crucified in the city square on the morrow," Levin outlined. "I have sent some more seeking leads, but..." Felipe smacked Levin's head, and the man staggered slightly. "I give you a kingdom's resource. You can't keep one valuable asset safe? You persist on a thread, Levin. I question if it's worth maintaining your life. You may cause trouble on succession." Levin shook his head, straightening his back once more. "I know my place. Indune is my better. I am inferior." Felipe stared down at Levin. "Be thankful Orion is your elder. Were he not, I would slay you." "I must thank my fortune." Levin dipped his head seriously. "Regarding your brother, the plague." Felipe stepped around the table, retrieving another map. "Outline its spread." Levin leaned forward, retrieving a writing implement. He drew a circle around part of the northwestern region of the kingdom. "Orion has been working diligently to keep it limited to this area. Travel has slowed in the northern regions on account of winter. When the ice thaws..." Levin trailed off, setting down his tool. "It will spread." Felipe stared at the drawing, saying nothing. "A prisoner under house arrest died under our care. This will be perceived as a foolish act of tyranny. The northern nobles rallied beneath us will waver. We cannot expect them to be as steadfast as before." "I've been working on..." "No," Felipe said coldly. "You will recall non-essential men in northern territories. Ensure only that we know that they do not act against us." "Now that things have come to this..." Felipe stroked his long beard. "We are weakened. We must weaken in turn. Then I will direct my attention towards sabotage." Levin nodded. Felipe lifted his head up, staring Levin in the eyes. "Send men to the northwestern regions. Collect the corpses of those that succumbed to the plague. Spread them across the south, everywhere." The king leaned over a map of the south. "Make sure Orion remains ignorant. The south will become a hellscape, where dead on the streets will be more common than clouds in the sky." Levin's breathing grew quick and his eyes widened. Once his breathing calmed, he nodded. "I will see this done, father. At the very least, I can count on your obedience." Felipe looked over. "Go. See it done." Levin turned and walked away. As he walked, his expression grew dead. Wind howled against the stone. In the middle of a cold stone cell, the sounds of someone shivering echoed in the empty dungeon. An orange-haired woman, nude, leaned against the wall. Her pale white skin was marred by jagged cuts everywhere. There was nothing in the cell besides stone and iron, not a single basic amenity. There were only the iron bars of the cell, and a window 10 feet above. Not even the tallest could ever hope to reach it, and even then, it was too thin to grant passage. As the woman sat there, shivering, waiting, a click echoed throughout the cell. The woman turned her head, peering out into the hallway beyond the bars. Another click came, louder this time, and she flinched. The clicks came again and again, each louder. She came to realize they were moving up the wall. The woman stood, moving to the cold bars of the cell. Something flashed near the window, and she shrunk away. After a moment, a thin rope ladder entered, dropping down. The woman shrunk away in terror, curling into a ball in the corner of the cell. The intruder chipped at the window, sending shards of stone into the cell as the window was forcibly widened. Eventually, the passage opened wide enough for entry. Someone crammed their way in, and then dropped down, landing. They wore a thick cloak and light leather armor. "Threes?" The man spoke, kneeling down. Threes looked up, Terrified, the man moved forward slightly, and she shrunk away as though he intended to hurt her. "Wear this," the man directed, setting something down and stepping away. "No time for terror, no time for delays. I offer help. Success lies on you." Her breathing slowed as she stared at what he'd set down. It was a simple fur robe. She slowly moved towards it, taking it in hand. After she put it on, she winced terribly, opening the scabs on some of her wounds, yet she seemed to relish in the warmth offered by the robe. "Come," the man directed, moving to the ladder. "This little climb is the last thing you'll need to do. There's a mage waiting outside." Threes walked unsteadily, wrapping her fingers on the ladder. She climbed up, shaking terribly. The man stepped up to the bars, peering beyond into the hallway. Once Threes was near the top of the ladder, he walked away, following just behind her on the rope ladder. Threes stalled at the top, having some difficulty making it through the narrow gap. The man gave a somewhat heartless push, forcing her past. An arm gripped her, pulling her to safety. She yelped out and started tremoring once more. But slowly, she realized she was in no danger of falling. The carved side of the Dragon Palace had little room for standing, yet stakes had been stabbed into the side, held up by magic. A big man held her up effortlessly. The man who entered into the cell emerged, rising to his feet. He held his hand out. "Let's go." "Don't make noise, lady." Threes nodded frantically, and the one holding her stepped off the stake. His boots lit up, and he slowly descended, gales billowing about his feet. Threes buried her head into the man's chest, unwilling to watch. After a long time, the man landed soundlessly on something. Threes lifted her head up. They were on a ledge on the side of the mountain that bore the Dragon Palace. Just behind them was a cave. It seemed to have been carved by hand, for it was supported with makeshift wooden pillars and showed signs of excavation. The big man set her down. "Go into the cave," he directed. Threes placed her hand to her chest and walked into the cave, casting glances every which way as though something could leap out at any moment. She spotted someone sitting, though they were of much thinner frames than those who'd entered and retrieved her. She walked up slowly. Princess Eleanor lifted her head. She was free of her blindfold, and one could see her empty, horrifyingly deformed eye sockets. Threes was used to the sight, so it was not jarring. But she still could not help but hold her breath. "Did you retrieve her?" Eleanor spoke. "Is she fine?" "Eleanor," Threes said, stepping forward. "Threes," the princess rose at once, stepping forth. She very nearly bumped into the woman, but Threes caught her arms. "You're alive," Eleanor said, relieved. "I brought a healer." Come. Threes's face was a mess of emotion. Relief, indignance, betrayal, joy, but she stepped forth, still leading the princess even now. A woman stepped forth from deeper within the cave, rushing to tend to Threes's wounds. "Threes, you did well," the princess said lightly. "And I failed you." With those simple words, the former maid burst into tears, lowering her head onto the princess' shoulder. Eleanor did not reject her, merely standing there while comforting her. "You will be taken from here to a safe place, a place I know will never be touched by the war," Eleanor soothed sweetly. "I didn't tell them anything, my princess," Threes muttered into her shoulder. I did my best." "I know." Eleanor touched her head delicately. She pushed the maid away so their faces were before each other's. "Now, you must abide alone for a time. Live well, live free. You will be taken care of." The princess deposited a sack of metal coins into the former maid's hand. The light of the rose gold magic coins shining could be seen even through the cloth. Magic shone at the back of her head. Threes's body sagged, and she fell onto the healer, unconscious. The healer hauled them away delicately, where yet more joined to tend to her. Once Threes was a sufficient distance away, the man who'd entered the cell stepped up to Eleanor. "Didn't know you had compassion. You pulled a lot of strings to save one little maid." "And what would you know?" Eleanor replied at once, all her sweetness gone. "This isn't about compassion. This is about reputation, power." "Oh yeah?" the man asked incredulously. "Yes," Eleanor said. "Wanton displays of cruelty befit my brother, not me. Everyone who serves me can guess that I was behind what happened to Bruno. With this, they know that those who serve me faithfully will not be tossed aside when it is expedient. Indeed, I can save my people from any trouble, even the attention of the king and his kingdom." Eleanor turned her head. "It's a message, nothing more. High-profile incidents demand proper replies." "Guess I expected too much from Avaska." The man shook his head. "Don't overstep, Rulio," she cautioned. "We share a goal, and so we work together. Do not presume to grow comfortable." "Do not presume," Rulio mimicked, then cackled. "Whatever. We're done here. Give me the payment I asked for, the usual way." He walked into the cave, past the people treating Threes, and vanished into darkness. Chapter 117. Myriad metal monuments marring mountains. Argrave's legs gave out as his feet sunk into the top of a sand dune, and he collapsed ungracefully onto the ground. As he lifted his face up and shook his head to dislodge sand, a lizard blending in with the surroundings scurried away, heading for the distance. Argrave followed it with his gaze, and far ahead, a great monument loomed above. "Are you all right?" Annalise asked, kneeling beside Argrave with genuine concern in her voice. "Just." Argrave rose to his knees, adjusting his misaligned backpack. Exhausted. He pointed ahead. You'd think 3 days of resting while we hid from that damned sandstorm would mean I'd be able to handle a desert hike easily. Whatever. Hargrave shook his head. I was worried that I got my directions mixed, but... There's Argent, in the distance. The silver one. The land before them was like a great crater in the earth. The black sand dunes of the burnt desert faded in way of rocky hills of igneous rock, descending down towards a central point. There were marks in the earth where rivers had once flowed, but they were gone, dried up utterly. Far beyond, sand dunes ranged once again, and a mountain encircled the sand, seemingly forming a great bowl. A wide waterfall descended down the side of one of these mountains, though it was quickly shielded by another tall peak. Hargrave saw a vague silhouette flying about, and after a time, distinguished it as a wyvern. In those mountains lived the last free tribe. In the center of the crater, there was a fortress city, Sethia. Its grey walls were every bit as grand as Matoth's, and perhaps even stood taller. The fortifications formed a perfect half-circle around the city itself. Where the missing half of the circle was, 3 roads led to 3 high towers, each structure the color of precious metals. Argent was, as its name might suggest, the silver tower. It was polished to the point where it reflected all around it. The reflection created a strange warping effect on its lower half, while the top half reflected the sunlight, rebounding into the air like a radiant crown of gold. It was surrounded by a wall of the same make as Sethia before it. The walls shielded in a state befitting a kind. The other 2 towers, Aurum and Cyprus, varied mainly in their tower's color. The copper tower, Cyprus, had long ago been covered with patina. Its bright green was pretty, yet decidedly lackluster in comparison to the 2 other towers. Aurum shone as brightly as Argent. One of these things is not like the other, Hargrave sung. What you see now in those towers is a good display of what's actually happening in Sethia. Hargrave leaned close to Annalise and pointed 2 fingers out, lining them up with the gold and silver towers. Aurum and Argent shine brilliantly, and control most of what goes on within the city. Cyprus has faded, lost its splendor. The mountains beyond. That is where the last independent southern tribes are? Annalise asked. Well, yeah, Hargrave nodded, lowering his pointed fingers. But don't you worry about that. Keep your eye on the prize. The prize, is it? Annalise's gaze lingered on Hargrave as he rose to his feet. That's correct. Hargrave turned around. We 4 have to exploit the faction dynamics within the city to get what I need. Though Hargrave spared a glance at his place atop Guilliman's backpack, Garm did not react to his inclusion in their party. Outsiders will have trouble gaining influence, Guilliman criticized. Hargrave turned his back to the city. When people are down on their luck, they're not going to be choosy with the hand reaching out to help them. So, we aid Cyprus, the one that has lost their luster, Annalise concluded, walking past Hargrave to stare at Sethia. Quick as a whip, little lady. Hargrave moved his head, following her as she walked past. The current Lord of Copper is a young, ambitious vessel who wants to recover his faction's power. He'll do anything to this end. Argent has the Wraith's heart. It might seem counterintuitive to go with Cyprus, but as you'll find, their faction is willing to do just about anything to get ahead. Hargrave strode away, continuing, they'll take suspicious people so long as they're helpful. They'll do anything that needs to be done, provided it gets them ahead. I intend to pit them against Argent. It's already what the Lord of Copper wants. I merely need to give him the push. Do wyverns visit the city? Annalise questioned. Hargrave turned his head. Look, I know I talked about getting a wyvern, but you might want to curb your... Annalise grabbed Hargrave and turned him around to face the city. He staggered a little, but she kept him steady and pointed off into the distance. He followed where she was pointing, squinting. You see? She asked as if validated. Hargrave didn't answer, staring at 3 flying creatures steadily growing closer to the city. He didn't know what to make of the situation. As the wyverns grew closer, he saw many people on their backs. Hargrave started walking down into the crater, keeping his eyes fixed ahead with his brows furrowed in confusion. The wyverns narrowed in on one of the towers, Argent. The furthest ahead landed on the wall around the tower. Someone atop its back threw a sling, and the projectile slammed into one of the windows, shattering it. After, the wyvern craned its neck, and the people atop the thing climbed up into the tower. The other 2 wyverns circled about, one clinging to the tower, all offloading men into the window. What in? Hargrave whispered, still walking into the crater. This is beyond your expectations? Guilliman questioned, jogging to catch up. What do? Hargrave stopped. No, I get it. Hargrave nodded. They're raiding the tower. God damn it, he cursed, moving a little faster. We've got to get down there. I have to see who's leading them. Exhaustion forgotten in wake of urgency, Hargrave moved down into the crater quickly enough that he could not afford to keep his eyes on the raid happening ahead. He watched his footing carefully as he descended down the rocky black hills, sending dirt and dislodged rocks tumbling down ahead of him. A bell rung out across the city, loud enough to be heard even distant as they were. As they descended into the crater, Sethia's wall grew too tall for them to see over its top. Hargrave gave the walls a wide berth, not wishing to draw the attention of any of those people guarding outside. Instead, he moved around Sethia, hoping to get the best view of Argent that he could. They were not alone in wishing to view the spectacle. It seemed people emerged out from the city walks, rushing to get a better look at the rare occurrence. Argrave felt that was a fortunate thing, for he did not need to be so restrained in his approach. Soon enough, he had a clear view of the incursion. The people were southern tribals, as could be expected from the masters of the wyvern. They wore armor made of wyvern scales, each and all beautifully crafted. They offloaded things from the windows, throwing crates and bags of valuables. Gemstones scattered from one poorly tossed bag, and he heard a shouted admonishment from a rider. Argrave walked while catching his breath, eye on the wyverns now that he had some leeway. Eventually, he saw the person he expected emerge from the tower. A tall man wearing a grey coat of lamellar wyvern scale armor stepped to the window. His helmet had a grand red plume. "Knew it was you, Darren," Argrave muttered beneath his breath as he watched. Nobody else would. Argrave's voice caught in his throat as he spotted another person step up. The man's shining plate armor stood out starkly beside the tribals, wearing armor of wyvern scale. The newcomer bore a mace, and his helmet was made in the shape of a boar with two tusks. With words escaping him, Argrave watched silently as the raiders began to emerge one by one, climbing back onto the now loaded wyverns. They clutched their haul tightly. From the city of Sethia, a mass of water made its way over the walls. The southern tribals spotted this, hurrying their escape. The wyverns braced, preparing to lift into the sky, with their powerful wings creating gales and scattering sand everywhere. The wyverns took off into the sky. Argrave shielded his eyes as he watched them go. The mass of water, a vessel, undoubtedly, wound its way up Argent until it came to the cone-shaped roof on its top. The water swirled in front of it, and a thin line of water shot out like a bullet into the distance after the wyverns. Despite the tremendous distance made, one of the wyverns was hit. It swayed, roaring, but managed to rebalance in time to prevent its descent. Argrave could see its blood dripping down into the sand it passed over, gliding for the mountains as it lost altitude. Argrave turned around, where Annalise and Gilliman watched with as much interest as he did. "Let's find a place to talk," Argrave sighed. "Let me explain things," said Argrave to his other three party members. They had elected to wait until things calmed down in the city to go inside. Being implicated with this happening would be a difficult stain to remove. They sat cross-legged in a relatively secluded part of the crater. "There. Avatar I told you to about, with which I experienced this world before." Argrave placed his finger on the ground. "I had 10 choices each time. A custom-made one, or 9 pre-existing ones. Of the ready-made, each was divided into 3 distinct categories: spellcaster, warrior, or rogue." Argrave paused, but all 3 were listening intently, even Garm, though he looked confused. "Stain was the pure rogue. Nicoletta was the pure spellcaster," Argrave continued. "You two met both of them?" He pointed to his 2 elven companions. Both nodded. "I also mentioned Melanie, as I remember. She's got a warrior focus, but she also has some traits from the rogue side of things. Then there's Rulio, who's rogue-focused with magic abilities. Now, I've seen 2 more of these avatars." Garm frowned. "What in the god's name are you talking about?" "A game," said Argrave, pushing past the head's interruption. "Bormask is here, the pure warrior. Darren is also here, another warrior with a dash of magic spice. From what I saw, they're working together." The 2 absorbed the information. Annalise adjusted her sitting position, then asked, "What significance does this hold?" "Well." Argrave paused, trying to discern this for himself. "Both are highly resourceful, and both are very talented. I have no doubt they were the driving force behind the raid that happened today. I can say this with certainty because it falls in line with what the player could do. One of the quests I described to you." Argrave kneaded his palm, questioning if he was explaining things sufficiently. "Do you believe these people took the Wraith's heart?" Annalise followed up. "No. Too well secured to be seized in such a quick raid." Argrave leaned back, looking to the shining silver tower. Things won't be predictable." "Then let us go based off what you know, and what we have seen," Annalise suggested, and Gilliman nodded, agreeing with the idea. "You know the people in control of this city. What will their response be?" Argrave looked down, thinking, the Southerners don't really have a use for baubles and trinkets from the tower. They have more pressing concerns, and don't value the material as much. Argrave looked up. "The vessels will respond as Darren probably intended for them to. I suspect he's working with Cyprus. It's a provocation. One that won't work, I believe. But why would he? His brain works in ways I can't codify in short form." Argrave sighed. "I could explain, but maybe you'll have the opportunity to ask. I don't want to make an enemy of him." Garm looked to have much on his mind, but said nothing. They stewed in the silence, before Gilliman asked, "What do we do now?" Argrave turned his head back to Sethia. "Things have probably settled. We can go to a place that I know. No brothel this time, thank the Lord." From there, Argrave turned his head back. "We'll have to adapt." Chapter 118, A Hand in Need. Argrave had a question. How does one gain the good graces of a faction in a xenophobic cult with enough power to rule over a city? As much as he wished to, he certainly couldn't walk up to any of the 3 towers, declare his intention to go inside, and be welcomed. The circumstance in Delphasium had been exceptional, but Sethia was a much larger city, and its lords were not nearly as gregarious as Mistress Tasha had been. Argrave and CO would be refused at the gate. He was certain, and he did not wish to test the theory. In Heroes of Berenda, the player's induction into Cyprus had been spurred by a random, coincidental happening, a chance meeting. In essence, the player would meet a vessel serving within the Tower of Cyprus, demonstrate their prowess, and things went from there. Argrave could not replicate that. Causing a chance meeting was even further beyond his purview. Despite thinking on the matter during the entire journey, Argrave couldn't answer his question. But with a little refinement from his companions, some half-baked ideas he'd been ruminating on blossomed into one beautiful little scheme. "This is the home," Glimmin whispered and nodded. It was night, and few people were out. They stood before a rather humble dark stone house. It had no windows, and its doors were shut tight. "I smell dried blood. And not in small amounts. If things are as you say, this is the place." Argrave exhaled. "Good. I thought it was, but it's better to be certain. Been a couple of months, you know. Things are starting to fade from my memory. So many spells to learn, overwriting what was once there." Argrave twirled his finger about his head. "Do you have a solution for that?" Glimmin questioned seriously. "Only rerunning things through my head constantly," Argrave admitted. "Whatever. Annalise is with Garm. Guess you and I just have to wait. Won't be long. Midnight, I think." Argrave looked up at the sky, staring at the red moon. "You don't really need to be here," Glimmin stated neutrally. "Following someone is best done alone." Argrave held out his hands. "I'm here, aren't I?" Glimmin raised a brow, then shook his head. "As you will." He grabbed Argrave's arm, shepherding him away a great distance. They made their way into an alley between two houses. It was quite dark, and Argrave couldn't even see the house any longer. The wait was long and boring, and Argrave wished he'd heeded Glimmin's suggestion. Glimmin's patience was boundless, though, and Argrave stood there fidgeting his hands until the elf's whisper broke the silence. "Someone's come out," he said. "They're being especially paranoid." "Wouldn't you?" Argrave questioned, craning his head to see beyond the wall. Glimmin forced him back. After a while of tense silence, Glimmin pushed Argrave deeper into the alley. "Come on." They made their way through the alley, emerging on a street on the other side of the one they followed. Glimmin was especially alert, taking quiet and deliberate steps in pursuit. Argrave tried to stay just as quiet and didn't dare speak. He knew Glimmin was tracking with senses other than sight, as the man they were following was not anywhere in the sight. HMPH. "Seems he knows the guard patrol routes," Glimmin noted. "He's made it to the farmland. He's digging." Argrave smiled and exhaled in relief. He had been somewhat skeptical this would work without a hitch, but things had fallen into place. They waited quietly on the street. After a time, Glimmin started to move beyond. They came to a patch bearing pepper plants. Argrave couldn't see anything amiss, but Glimmin knelt down, removed one gauntlet, and then dug into the earth. The elven vampire had to dig very deep, but eventually, Argrave saw a dim blue mark. As Glimmin dug more, the rest of it was revealed. A freshly severed human hand with a mark on the backhand signifying its former owner as a human belonging to a vessel of Fellhorn. Glimmin picked up the hand. "This is what you need?" "Yeah," Argrave nodded. The thing was mostly drained of blood, and the dark-skinned hand was much paler than it had any right being. As a consequence, that should get some attention, for sure. "Then I'm to do the next thing?" Glimmin questioned, rising to his feet. "Yep." Argrave nodded, tearing his gaze away from the hand. "Go to the house. Scare them. Make sure they think someone's onto them." "Excuse me," Argrave greeted, drawing close to the large gates of the wall to Cyprus. Two men stood in front of the great stone doors of the wall. They bore brown silken clothing covering most of their body, and their spiked helmets were made of dull bronze resembling copper. "Keep your distance," the guards cautioned. "Turn back. This is the residence of the Lord of Copper. You have no reason to be here." "Is this the place I might report a crime?" Argrave said quickly, ensuring he got their attention. The guards looked at Argrave and his company of two warily. They might have brought Garm, but he didn't want to risk anything with this little venture. He was safely in their inn. "A crime?" the guard repeated. Argrave held out a hand, not his. Strangely enough, the guards looked at each other, then back to Argrave. Funny how offering a hand to someone in need can earn you friends so easily, Argrave mused, sitting cross-legged on a once decadent couch that had not been maintained or changed for several years. Neither Glimmin or Annalise, sitting just beside him, seemed amused by his joke, and so Argrave sighed as they waited. "Come on, a bit of levity amidst morbidity is the best way to handle it," Argrave urged them. "What we are doing here is beyond merely turning a blind eye," Annalise said. "We're involved. It is merely hard to swallow." Argrave had no answer to that, so he stayed silent. As Argrave had hoped, the hand alone was evidence enough to earn him a meeting inside Cyprus. The guards out front had deemed this matter important, and so they fetched someone more able to handle this matter. Argrave looked around the interior of Cyprus, taking in the sights. It was the first floor of the tower, so one might expect that it would be the best kept and the most presentable. Disrepair was the best term for the room Argrave saw, though. There was one long, if decrepit, tapestry winding about the whole of the room, depicting the god Fellhorn and various Fellhorn peripheral scenarios. After a while examining it sequentially, Argrave realized it depicted their creation myth. He was just about to rise to his feet to examine the tapestry when someone came back into the room. Barring his brown-plumed helmet, the man seemed a guard just as those before. Argrave knew who he was, the Lord of Copper's primary human commander, Captain Geralian. He was an old man with the air of a hardened veteran about him. His hair was all grey, and his beard was short and patchy as though he was normally clean-shaven but hadn't groomed in a few days. Captain Geralian stepped up to them. He had the severed hand, clasping it by the wrist. "Foreigners, my men tell me that you discovered a man trying to bury this hand." "That's right," Argrave confirmed. "And, further." He stopped, retrieving a stool off to the side. He set it across from them and sat. "You alleged to have discovered an underground smuggling ring where the citizens of Sethia are spirited from the city and taken to the southern mountains?" Argrave paused a few seconds before nodding and confirming, "Yes." Geralian straightened on his stool, back rigid. He stared at them with cold golden eyes. "Describe what happened." "Well." Argrave paused as though gathering his thoughts, but he had long ago prepared what to say. "The three of us were walking about the city, and, at night?" He interrupted. "It's nice out at night." Argrave shrugged. "We're from the north. We enjoy the cold. The moon is nice." Argrave held his hands out and continued to explain. "Anyway, we turn the corner and stumble upon this guy. He's digging near a patch of those spicy, fruit-like crops." Argrave made the shape of a pepper with his fingers, acting ignorant of what they were. "Peppers," Geralian interrupted. "Go on." "He sees us, we see him." "I didn't think anything was amiss at first, but then he takes off, holding a bag or something." "He dropped that hand you see there," Argrave pointed. "We start chasing him, and," Geralian held out a hand to interrupt. "Why were you chasing him?" "Because he dropped a severed hand," Argrave said as though it was obvious. "A fresh one, too." "You chased him because of that?" Geralian pressed disbelievingly. "You're acting like that's unusual," Argrave retorted, equally incredulous. "It's the duty of the faithful to ensure no crime goes unpunished, such as Vade teaches us." Geralian bit his lips, thinking about what Argrave said, then nodded. "Go on." "Once we catch up and he sees that we're foreigners, he starts pleading with us. He tells us about what he's been doing. Apparently, people come to him, usually former tribals, as he said, and they set things up to send people away to the mountains. They sever the person's hand to get rid of the mark of Fellhorn, stage a death where it's difficult to find the body, and use this underground passage to get far enough from the city to make the journey to the mountains," Argrave concluded, pointing at Geralian. Geralian furrowed his brows, staring at Argrave as though he was a madman. And he claimed he could take us to the house where this smuggling ring purportedly is, Master Briam, Geralian said, kneeling before a man in a bed. The Lord of Copper fit his title well, even if only by virtue of his copper-toned skin. He wore silky orange clothes, which concealed a thin body with a large frame. The wet nature of the vessel's skin made his body seem like genuine metal, shining against the light splendidly. All of the jewelry he wore was copper, rings, bracelets, earrings, etc. He sat on the edge of the bed, posture straight and tensed. He was a handsome man with tight, stern features, and wavy brown hair descending to his shoulders. "Your impression?" Briam inquired, voice low and serious. "He's very clearly a foreigner," Geralian said at once. "His customs, beliefs, and behaviors are far from ours." Regarding the veracity of his words, "The information he offers is too easy to confirm and matches up with some occurrences noted in the city. I can't believe he'd lie about this." Yet, stumbling across someone burying a hand, having that same person disclose the entire operation? Briam asked rhetorically. "If the people involved were that incautious, they would not have lasted this long." Geralian lifted his head once, then quickly lowered it, saying no more. "He's telling the truth about this thing's existence," Briam finally concluded. "But he isn't being entirely honest about his role in the matter." "What should be done, Master Briam?" Geralian said quickly, thinking of his character. "I believe he was involved with their group, but once he discovered they offered no benefit, came to those he thought would. He's enterprising, ruthless, even. Yet he came to Cyprus, Master." Meaning no offense, Geralian quickly added, "Argent Aurorum might offer a one-time reward, or none at all. But I think he doesn't wish to be powerless. He wants room to grow." Briam smiled. "He chose luckily. Or chose well. I cannot decide which." "What of his capability?" "He claims to be a C-rank spellcaster, while his elven companion is B-rank. The last, their warrior, is intimidating," Geralian said with a simple shake of his head. Briam stood up from his bed. "It seems I must speak to this man myself, discern if he is ruthless and intelligent enough to be of use in Cyprus' future. He may be of great use, or a waste of time. I'll decide that." Chapter 119, Contracted Metalworker. Argrave had been pondering morality the whole time during his journey to Sethia. He supposed it was normal to examine oneself when confronted with the uncaring power dynamics within this southern region of Berenda. Argrave had his own moral code, naturally, and though he might be a bit more flexible than most others, he largely felt he was a righteous person. Everyone did. And yet Argrave now found himself exposing a secret smuggling ring that offered people freedom from the vessels, or to earn the good graces of a cult worshipping an ancient god that used its subservient people as walking water bottles. He reckoned it was a little like exposing the Underground Railroad to become friends with Jefferson Davis. Of course, Argrave had Gilliman scare them a little before exposing them, and hopefully they wouldn't be genuinely caught. But their operation had gone bust, and there would be no more escapes from the city. Argrave was drawn from his haze of thoughts at another person's entrance. He was a bit surprised to see the next comer, Priam, the copper-skinned lord of Cyprus. Though Argrave could not deny he was surprised he'd climbed the managerial chain so quickly, he came to attention at once, uncrossing his legs and sitting a bit more politely. "Greetings, gentlemen. Madame," Priam began smoothly, coming to stand before them. "I am the Lord of Copper, Priam. I came here to personally thank the three of you for what you've exposed here today." He placed his hand to his chest in thanks but did not bow his head. That little gesture was a good show of his personality. On the surface he was polite, yet beneath was pride and ambition that did not allow him to bow his head to any. A pleasant surprise, meeting the lord of this tower. "I am Argrave of Blackguard." He hesitated in saying the last part, remembering well what happened when he last used that name. "My companions are Annalise and Gilliman," he introduced in turn. "Of Blackguard," Priam repeated. "What is your home of Blackguard like, if you don't mind me asking?" "It's a bustling riverside city, located where many rivers meet. Place has the only bridge for miles, so it's a rather busy trade city," Argrave supplied smoothly. Priam smiled inexplicably. "I see." He moved the stool that Geralian had set across from them, then sat atop it himself. His back was rigid and unbent, and he surveyed each of the three of them in turn. "This smuggling ring you exposed, I am having men examine it as we speak," Priam began. "You've done a valuable service. Yet strangely, you came to the Tower of Copper." Priam rubbed his fingers together. "Perhaps I am ignorant of your lands, but as I recall, copper is the least valuable form of coinage in Vasca." Argrave nodded, catching the message beneath the vessel's words. "Gold and silver are shiny and brilliant. People tend to like those metals for that reason." Priam gestured towards Argrave. "And yourself?" "Copper." Argrave leaned in until he was at the edge of the couch. "Copper a strong metal at its core. But when you combine it with something else, a different metal, far from itself, you get something stronger. You get alloys, bronze, brass." Argrave counted the two with his fingers, then waved his hand with a smile. "Both prime examples." Priam laughed lightly, raising his hand to cover his mouth. "I see your metaphor. You are different, far from copper, certainly." Priam lowered his hand, expression stern. "But metalworking is a complex business. The wrong component can weaken the metal instead of strengthening it. How can you be certain you'll get the results you want?" "Damned metaphors making my hand spin," Argrave thought. "It's as with anything, I've done it before." Argrave leaned back to emphasize his confidence. "But if there's doubt, you can always stick with the reliable, practice, testing. Make a small batch of bronze alloy instead of converting all your copper at once. Once you're sure it works, upscale the process." Priam stared down Argrave. His dark brown eyes had an intense sharpness to them that made it clear he scrutinized Argrave carefully. After a time, his eyes lightened and he smiled. "Do you enjoy poetry, Argrave?" Argrave was taken aback by the conversational turn, but he answered, "Some, certainly." "Do you write?" he pressed. Argrave shook his head. "Not poetry. But yes, I suppose what I've done qualifies. Perhaps, at a later date, I can share some of my poems with you. I have the feeling you'll appreciate it." Feeling strangely insulted, Argrave nodded slowly. "Another time, maybe," he said without committing. "But I digress. Back to this matter of alloys, and power." Priam lowered his head, lost in thought. After a time of deliberation, he raised his gaze up to Argrave. "I think things are as you say. An alloy. The thought has never crossed my mind, but I believe it's worthy of, at least, a test batch." "I'm pleased you agree," Argrave said, though the words felt empty. "But cutting past all this." Priam placed his hands on his knees. "A metalsmith's services can't be cheap." "What do you want, exactly?" "To make a strong alloy," Argrave said vaguely. "Of which my metal is a part of." "Let's set aside the vagaries and speak frankly." Priam waved his hand dismissively. "All right." Argrave thought of his words carefully. "Beyond eking out a place for myself in this city, Argent has something I want. It's not the sort of thing they give away, either, even if I ask really nicely." Priam nodded as if he'd figured things out. "And bronze is more than fitting to break silver." "Yeah," Argrave simply agreed, tired of this long analogical train. "Well." Priam crossed one leg over the other. He held his hands out, placing the tips of his fingers against each other like some kind of diabolical schemer. "I'm going to have to work something out for you to do, and verify the veracity of the information you disclosed, naturally." That said, Priam held a hand out. "I believe this may serve to be a long and fruitful relationship, gentleman Argrave of Blackguard." Argrave looked at the vessel's hand, acknowledging that the other intended for a handshake. He triple-checked he was wearing thick leather gloves and was quite thankful for the protective enchantment as he reached out and took the other's hand. Likewise, Argrave concluded. Their party walked from the Tower of Cyprus. Argrave's steps were heavy. He felt guilty, like he'd done something wrong. The talk with Briam hadn't assuaged that feeling. There's something I'm curious about, Annalise spoke. Are all poets deviants? Argrave tried to guess her question in jest. The answer may surprise you. No, she laughed while shaking her head. This name, Blackguard, you use it consistently. That is what I was curious about. Oh. Argrave scratched the back of his neck, lowering his head. You're embarrassed, she noted. Argrave looked at her. If I wasn't before, after that call-out, I definitely am. Your embarrassment only makes me more curious, she pressed. Argrave took a deep breath and sighed. He looked between both of them. Even Gilliman expressed that he was focused on Argrave's answer. That city I described, back there. Argrave paused in the road. It doesn't exist. But I've made it before. Annalise and Gilliman looked at him strangely, and he quickly added, in the game. Argrave continued. A lot of northern and southern Berendra are divided by a big river. In the future, it becomes an almost natural border between the rebels and Vaska loyalists. The biggest bridge between the two is an important place to hold in the war. It's located in a valley, too, so it's quite a defensible place. There's a sizable and largely ungoverned native population, too. So this city, Blackguard, you founded it in the game? Annalise questioned. Yeah, Argrave nodded. Probably the best bit of land in the game. Lots of good farmland, choke points preventing raids, pre-existing population, center of trade, but the name, Annalise stopped him. What does it mean to you? Just a name, isn't it? Argrave answered, turning back to the road. I do not believe it is merely that, she insisted. Argrave bit his lip, the answer on the tip of his tongue. All right, he surrendered, throwing his hands up in the air. If Gerektik Kiet wins, the world ceases to exist. It becomes a void. A void is blackness. I consider that name, Blackguard, just as that. A guard against that endless darkness. A guard against Gerektik Kiet. I see. You see, Argrave repeated. I think it is a noble name, she said sincerely. Argrave laughed. Well, I should probably stop using it, or it'll stick. She tilted her head. Is that so bad? It is a fine name, and it does indeed represent what you do. Well. Argrave scratched the top of his head, thinking on the matter. Do you not intend to establish this Blackguard once again? She held a hand out to Argrave as though to encourage introspection. You said you wish to follow the course you deem best. Is this not part of it? I'm no lord. Argrave shook his head. Can't press some buttons and make people build a whole damned city for me as I could before. Someone inexperienced like me would do a lot more harm than good. Gilliman shook his head. You overestimate the abilities of lords, I think. He looked around. This place alone is testament to that. Why does it seem like you two are trying to persuade me? Argrave questioned suspiciously. We're thinking about the distant future when tomorrow is uncertain. Let's stay on task, shall we? The two of them conceded with slow nods. Good, Argrave said in conclusion. I know you two might be blue working with the Lord of Copper back there. He views us as a means to an end. What he hasn't considered, hopefully, is that he's the same to us. Argent, Cyprus, Aurum, I don't intend this to be some sort of power game. How do you mean? Gilliman questioned. We're raising a dog, Argrave said with a little smirk. A fierce dog, to compete in the dog fight. We'll raise Cyprus up. And then we'll bring in Aurum and Argent, and the two will snarl and bite at each other. And who, you ask, wins in this bloody sport? Argrave waited for an answer, but neither Gilliman nor Annalise supplied one. Definitely not the dogs, I'll tell you that much. Poor bastards. Argrave shook his head woefully. No, the spectators win. The people of the city, Annalise guessed. Them, too, Argrave acknowledged. But I was really referring to the southern tribals. Guess that guy's way of talking rubbed off on me. Annalise furrowed her brows, lost in thought. But how? If I've got things right, we'll soon be involved with Dran and Bormask. Ask yourself this, why weren't any vessels at Argent when the raid occurred? Argrave spread his hands out. Because Cyprus used what little influence they have to make that happen. I think I understand now, Annalise nodded. Gilliman adjusted the sword on his hip as he thought, then asked, why is Duran working with Cyprus? Were I to guess, he hopes to earn a better living situation for the tribals. Argrave pointed to Gilliman. He's a tribal himself, you see. Briam probably made empty promises. Felhorn doesn't like violence, but lies and deception are fair game. Argrave held his hands out. This is only my speculation. Of course, I think we'll find out the truth of things quickly enough. I worry about what the Lord of Copper will ask of us, Annalise admitted. Argrave sighed. Yeah, that's the uncertain bit. We have to hurry up and wait once more. Chapter 120. Copper Link. Argrave found the city of Sethia to be a mix between Delphasium and Malgeridum. While lacking the despotism of the latter, and not exactly possessing the abundance of the former, it met in the middle. Perhaps the vessels were somewhat cautious of the treatment of their people with a threat. The southern tribals in the mountains, looming so close. Indeed, they had managed to find an inn at a decent price, The coins they'd obtained in Malgeridum had been of tremendous help in securing a non-exorbitant expense. Only a day had passed in the town, but Argrave suspected he would be spending much time in Sethia, so he was glad to not spend too much. But now they idled and studied, nothing to do beyond wait for Briam to contact them. Only a day had passed, but Argrave appreciated the change in pace very much. Good food, a decent bed, a welcome reprieve from their time trapped in a storm of sand. If I might advise you, Argrave, Annalise said gingerly, sitting on a table before Argrave's bed. He sat half covered by a blanket. You're smarter than me. Why would I ever refuse your advice? He conceded quickly. Oh. Annalise showed a rare moment of pause, taken aback by his words. Cheeks a little red, she gathered herself quickly and said, I would hold back trying to learn any B-rank spells yet. Argrave leaned back into his bed, looking down at the B-rank spellbook. He thought about her words, then lifted his head and asked, why? Because it is challenging, especially if you have only a shallow mastery of C-rank spells, she explained patiently. At the moment, I believe it would be best to focusing on those you are capable of learning, rather than trying to stretch yourself as you are. Garm added, the girl is right. You might have the magic capacity to handle spells of that rank, but if the knowledge is shallow, you'll only waste your time. It'll take longer, much longer. It's naught but wasted time. Argrave bit his lip, then decisively shut the book, setting it on the table where Annalise sat. All right, I'll heed your advice. A part of me questions if you just want more time to ask me questions about my homeland. He pointed to Annalise. She smiled. I wonder, she replied vaguely, though Argrave knew she was only joking. Argrave lowered his finger, then flitted his gaze between the two of them. But I'm just curious, why should I hold back on reaching this milestone? Why would it take longer? Because B-rank magic differs greatly from the ranks below it, Garm said. Each rank before it adds complexity, both to the matrix and the spell. The increased complexity accommodates increased power. The matrix is larger, it can manifest more raw magic. Annalise nodded as Garm spoke. But B-rank magic does not add another dimension to the spells. Instead, the previously static matrices become animate. I know about that, Argrave said. But why would having a shallow understanding of lower-ranked spells hinder me? For C-rank, I just kept studying, thinking about it. Until something clicked. He shrugged, not fully grasping it himself. I know it's far from the image of a scholarly mage, but it worked. The fact you don't understand why something clicked is the problem, Garm admonished, and Argrave turned his gaze to face the severed head. Put simply, you will be adding movement to C-rank spells. If you can't understand the quintessence of these spells, how will you ever learn how to move them? Argrave didn't respond, and Garm's face grew serious as he continued. Learn more. Come to understand C-rank spells completely and utterly, illusion, elemental, healing, it matters not. When you understand what you did different, you will be ready to poke at the next barrier. Until then, refrain. Argrave nodded, taking in Garm's words in silence. Thanks for the advice, he finally remembered to say. Garm closed his eyes. Nothing more unbearable than watching incompetence as an expert. The head dismissed. Doubly so when I am unable to do much myself. Argrave found it difficult to hold back a smile at the head's attitude. But I have. Sharp knocks disturbed Argrave's words, and he tensed, immediately looking to Gilliman. The elf stood up, holding his ebony axe close at hand. Evidently the vampire had not heard whoever was just outside the door, and that set all of them on edge. Argrave quickly lifted Garm and hid him under a blanket. Gilliman opened the door slightly, bracing it with his foot so it could not be forced open. A woman wearing red clothing stood beyond. It took only a few seconds looking at her wet, dark skin to identify the woman as a vessel. She had sharp, narrow features, and looked so thin as to be starving. Argrave immediately recognized her as one of the vessels sworn to serve the Lord of Copper, though for some reason he could not recall her name. Gilliman, he called out. She's one of Briam's. Let her in. The woman seemed surprised, yet not uneased, that Argrave knew her purpose immediately. Once Gilliman opened the door, she eyed him and his axe without much caution before taking slow, almost sauntering steps inside. She looked around the room. So you're the ones, she said. The chosen ones. Yes, Argrave said glibly. Something you need? Unamused by his quip, the woman stared at Argrave coldly. Argrave? She asked, and when Argrave confirmed with a nod, she continued, saying, the Lord of Copper would meet you. He expects to see you and your companions out front of the Grand Tower of Cyprus. Out front? Argrave tried to confirm. Yes, she confirmed begrudgingly, as though she loathed the question. The master says to arm yourself, though he isn't expecting you'll need to fight. Argrave furrowed his brows questioningly, and then nodded. We'll be there, shortly. Though Argrave had been worried that Briam's request to see them out front meant that he would refuse them access to the Tower of Cyprus, that was not the case. Instead, the Lord of Copper stood just outside the walls of his tower, with a small entourage of vessels. The vessels swearing fealty to the Lord of Copper all wore clothes matching the shades of the metal that was their namesake, oranges, browns, reds, and all in between. None of their outfits could be called decadent, barring Briam's. Argrave, still in black enchanted leather, felt out of place as he approached them. Briam had been engaging the vessels near him, but when he spotted Argrave he tore away from the group without a word and spread his arms wide as though to welcome Argrave with an embrace. Finding himself in a predicament, Argrave slowed and raised his hand to wave. "Lord Briam," he said cautiously. "You're here." And promptly, too, Briam greeted, not making to embrace Argrave as he feared. "That's good. Honestly, you're early." "That's fine. Let us speak some. I will inform you what is to happen." "I'm all ears," Argrave said. Briam placed his hands together, then walked past Argrave, obviously wishing for him to follow. "I found nothing suitable to pass to you on such short notice, unfortunately. These things take time. Perhaps that is why you were surprised to have been contacted so quickly. If you found nothing, then..." Argrave trailed off, unsure where this was going. My mouth outpaced my mind. He shook his head, walking down the road. Argrave followed him, the two of them walking side by side. "I'm sure you remember a certain happening some 2 days ago, I believe. It revolved around the southern tribals' wyverns, and a raid on Argent. It was our welcome into the town." Argrave nodded. "Was it now?" Briam questioned, then continued. "At the time, much of the Lord of Silver's vessels were engaged with me." Briam placed a hand to his chest. "Even Lord Quarus himself was engaging in a discussion with me. It was a minor dispute, which of the city's people belonged to who and such. This proved an inopportune time for them to have such a discussion. Their tower was raided while they were away." "Funny timing," Argrave commented. "Hilarious," Briam agreed with a plastic smile. He stopped in the road, and Annalise and Gilliman came to stand with Argrave. "Today, the Lords of Argent and Aurum have insisted I meet to discuss this matter. They believe I am subverting them." Briam clasped his hands together. "I have to correct the misunderstanding." "But what do you want us to do?" Argrave questioned. "You're going to come with me to this meeting," he stated plainly. Argrave didn't know what to say to that for a time. It had been the last thing he was expecting to hear. He shifted on his feet and questioned delicately, "Don't you think, if you want to give them the idea that you aren't subverting them, bringing a foreigner into the meeting might send the wrong message?" "I have some plans on that front, fret not." Briam shook his head. "You'll learn them once we're there." Argrave was frustrated by the vagary but could not point it out directly. "This doesn't really test whether or not we're trustworthy," Argrave noted. "In fact, it's really just risking for nothing. I could cause problems for you." "Well..." Briam raised a hand to his chin and cradled it delicately. "A part of me likes you. You possess some of the politeness of a gentleman of the burnt desert without the obsequious fawning I'm constantly privy to as the Lord of Copper. A pleasant balance." "I trust that's not all," Argrave pressed. Briam put on his best smile once more. "I think you know in your head what's at stake." Argrave's features grew taut at once. Between the emphasis, the word choice, and the complete non sequitur, there could only be one thing that Briam was referring to. "Garm." "Don't worry," Briam said calmly as Argrave's mind whirled with a million questions. "I don't care. Indeed, that kind of thing only affirms my choice. Someone willing to step past the line into the forbidden is precisely what I need at this juncture." Argrave suppressed the urge to shout and demand, "How?" As much as he wished he could believe that Briam was simply bluffing to extract information from him, there was little room for interpretation. It was no bluff. Briam knew about Garm, and beneath that, he could make Argrave's life very difficult. Argrave was certain Briam wasn't an exceptional schemer or master at espionage. That made the scenario all the more baffling. They hadn't been incautious with Garm. Measures were taken at every turn to ensure he couldn't be easily seen. "Once more, don't let this weigh at you," Briam said, reaching up and grabbing Argrave's shoulder. It felt like a spider was on his arm, but he stayed still. "We have a meeting to attend later. I'd like you to keep your tongue sharp for that." He removed his hand and waved Argrave forward. "Come, meet the vessels beneath me." If you like this audiobook, subscribe the channel for more videos like this. And join my Patreon if you want to support me, where you can find the complete collection Jackal Among Snakes audiobooks. Hurry up, what are you waiting for? Leave some comment and let me know if you guys like this story, or you have a web novel you like and want to hear its audiobook. I will be happy to create them for you. Please like, share, and leave a comment on the video.